So I will first go over the agenda for our presenter, and then I will introduce her, and then I'm going to let her take over. So for tonight on our agenda, Megan Potente from Decoding Dyslexia California will go over a little bit about Decoding Dyslexia California. She'll talk about what is involved with reading, what is dyslexia and its signs, what does it feel like to have dyslexia, what to do if your child has reading difficulties, and she's going to share a little bit about the latest with universal screening and literacy policy in our state, as well as sharing some resources. And at the end, we'll have Q&A. So to introduce our speaker, Megan has been active in the Decoding Dyslexia California leadership for over 6 years. She is also a co-leader of Decoding Dyslexia California's San Francisco support group. Megan is a former 20-year elementary educator with experience as a classroom teacher, a literacy specialist, a literacy coach, a special education teacher, and an educational therapist in private practice. Megan has extensive structured literacy experience, including expertise in the Slingerland approach. Megan has been featured on KQED and also moderates the California Science of Reading, What I Should Have Learned in College Facebook group. She has a son, brother, and a nephew with dyslexia, and we are so honored to have her speak with us today about decoding dyslexia and about dyslexia in general. So I'm going to go to her presentation, and I'm going to spotlight her so that we can all see her. So give me a moment to do that. Okay. Great.
Great. And is the presentation in, looks like it might be in, there you go. Okay. Thank you so much, May, for the introduction. It's really great to be here. I appreciate LearnUp so much and all that you do. I know so many families who have been supported by the work that you do, so thank you. So I'll start with who are we? Who is Decoding Dyslexia? You can move, skip that agenda because you already kind of went over it. So let's begin with our mission statement. Decoding Dyslexia is a grassroots movement driven by California families, educators, and professionals dedicated to improving literacy outcomes for struggling readers, especially those with dyslexia. We work to empower families, educate for equitable access, or advocate for equitable access to evidence-based literacy instruction, and raise dyslexia awareness. Dyslexia does not discriminate based on ethnicity, gender, intelligence, or socioeconomic background. However, DDCA recognizes that educational inequities exist that can create significant barriers for children of color, English learners, and children with a disadvantaged socioeconomic status in our California public schools. Somehow, families who've lived the reading struggles understand that in a real way and are working hard to change things for children who don't have access to the instruction they need. So could you go to the next slide, please? May, can you go back up? Okay, so okay, a little bit of our story. So the Decoding Dyslexia movement was born in 2011 when 9 New Jersey dyslexia parents were on a train on their way to the International Dyslexia Association conference. And they met each other and they realized that they all had a very similar story of their children struggling and their issues not being recognized and really having a very difficult time getting what their kids needed. So they banded together and started the movement. And their movement spread across the US and beyond when they issued the How-To Guide, which I believe is still online on the main Decoding Dyslexia site. So DDCA formed in 2013. And it began as a 100% volunteer-based group, and we still are. I'm a volunteer, and everyone who works with us across the state supporting families, we're all volunteers. We have had a lot of legislative success, including our first bill, AB 1369, which was signed in 2015. We have regional leaders that create awareness and advocate for improvement in school districts, and support groups are key to our mission. And those are mostly on Zoom these days, but they're available throughout the state, and you can find out where they are on our website. I'll direct you to that later. Okay, next slide, May. Okay, so what is involved with reading? So as adults, most of us really take reading for granted, but it's actually quite a complex process. It requires sounding out words, which we refer to as decoding. And equally important is language comprehension, the ability to understand spoken language. Together, these two abilities result in reading comprehension, or the ability to understand what one reads. A weakness in either decoding or in language comprehension will result in poor reading comprehension. So those two, the word level reading and oral language, are relatively independent abilities, but together they create skilled reading. Okay, so here we have a picture of the brain. And you can see there's different areas of the brain colored to identify the roles that those different areas of the brain play in the complex process of reading. So what's interesting is that everyone around the world uses these same parts of their brain in an integrated pathway to read and spell. And we're not born with this pathway. It develops through instruction and practice. Okay, next slide. So this graphic is referred to as Scarborough's reading rope. And it's a great graphic because it shows all of the different parts that are integrated to create skilled reading. So on the top part in the blue, we have the strands of language comprehension, which involves a lot. Background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, language structures, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge. This is all the language that children speak in the home or are learning at school, or that is the basis of reading. The foundation of reading is language. And then at the bottom, we have the word recognition strand, which includes phonological awareness. That's the ability to distinguish sounds in words. Decoding is sounding out words and spelling words. And then when those things become automatic, there's sight recognition, the ability to automatically recognize a word. So when all of this comes together over time and with practice, we have skilled reading. Okay, yes, next slide. So here we have some pictures of the brain again, and this is actually a graphic that was created following images that were taken as a part of magnetic resonating images, so from MRIs, brain scans. And they really, these images, when they first came out, really demonstrated that, in fact, the brains of those with dyslexia operate differently from brains of kids who are not dyslexic, or individuals. So on the left, you see that there is the red area is larger, and the green and the blue, smaller, and different pattern on those who are non-dyslexic students. And what is happening there is that the red area recognizes where there is a lot of compensation going on. So in order to become a strong reader, you really need to develop an efficient reading circuit. And so the blue and the green areas really need to have a very connected circuit there. Kids with dyslexia have a hard time developing that circuit, and the red, as I said, is compensating. So that was when we were able to have those brain images, it really changed the conversation related to dyslexia. So here are some basic accepted facts about reading. So humans, as I mentioned, evolved for speech. It's acquired easily and rapidly by interacting with other speakers. But reading is different. Reading is a modern, relatively modern invention. It's a technology, and therefore it needs to be taught because of our writing system. It was an invention. Learning to read repurposes and rewires parts of the brain. So in building that circuit for reading, we are rewiring our brains. Neuroscience shows that all brains learn to read in the same way. And what I mean by that is that everyone has to develop that circuit in their brain that is connecting the letters and the sounds and the meanings. And the instruction that works for people with dyslexia works for all students, because what we're doing is building that circuit for reading, and that circuit is universal. So dyslexia, what are the signs? So dyslexia is recognized as a specific learning disability, which is neurological in origin and based in language. People with dyslexia struggle to read and spell. It affects between 5 and 20% of the population and is often hereditary. As was mentioned, I have a brother, a nephew, and a son who all have dyslexia. Early identification is key, and dyslexia can be screened for as early as preschool. Students with dyslexia can learn to read and spell through structured literacy instruction. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Okay, so dyslexia is not a problem with, this slide actually I find to be a little bit confusing, because on the right, those are not myths, but we're trying to dispel the myths. So there are myths that dyslexia may be related to intelligence, and it is not. Kids with dyslexia are just as smart as their peers. Dyslexia is not a vision problem or an issue with reading backwards. Dyslexia is not something that you outgrow, but with early intervention and appropriate accommodations, literacy outcomes greatly improve. And dyslexia is not a problem with laziness. So what are the signs of dyslexia? This slide shows many, many different kinds of symptoms of dyslexia. And of course, they may apply to some people, and some people may not exhibit all of these things. Some people possibly do, but there is a wide assortment of ways that dyslexia can affect spelling, listening, writing, telling time, memory challenges, motor control, reading. And I think, for my son, it's helpful for him to recognize sometimes that how his dyslexia presents, right? That the handwriting, he has a lot of these symptoms, but so this is a nice graphic. I think that some of these things here people might not realize are related to dyslexia, but in fact they are. Like the telling of the time is an interesting one. Okay, next slide. So the signs, what to look for? Well, poor spelling is really, I think, the most overlooked sign. It's really the most obvious, and unfortunately, spelling does not receive the attention it deserves in schools. So penmanship, use of simplistic word choice when writing, inability to manipulate or hear sounds in words, inability to sound out new words. That is a really key one. Listening comprehension is better than reading comprehension. Mispronouncing words or using an incorrect but similar word like paschetti instead of spaghetti. Need directions repeated multiple times, difficulty getting started on work, trouble copying, disorganized, left-right confusion. And dyslexia really can impact social emotional well-being. So anxiety, depression, defiance are all might be signs of a reading struggle. Okay, so incorporated in our presentation today, we have two short activities that are taken from our dyslexia simulation that we do a lot. So it's going to give you a little taste of what it might feel like to be in a classroom and have dyslexia. So the first simulation is a reading comprehension exercise. So go ahead and take I'll give you just 2 minutes or a minute to read this to yourself, and then we will discuss it. Okay, let's take a minute to debrief. I guess, May, we could have people, if you want to call it, if people want to, comment, they're welcome to. So, who is the story about? Does anyone want to share their experience in reading this today or what they understood from this passage?
I could just share some initial reactions. It starts with he, and then I see a name Curly. So I'm just assuming that it could be Curly, who this story is about.
Okay, can anyone tell like what happened? It's frustrating, isn't it? Let's, May, why don't you go to the next slide? Wait, I lost you. Oh, so can you put the screen back on? Put the presentation back on?
It is. Let me just reshare.
Okay, so here's the actual passage. And he had never, so take a minute now and go ahead and read it, and we'll discuss. Okay, so I think it's all clear. It's much easier to understand now. This passage is actually, does anyone recognize it? It's Call of the Wild by Jack London. And I think it's pretty clear that it's very difficult to read when you don't know the words, right? And I think that was in the prior slide, that's only like 10% fewer words, yet it makes it almost undecipherable. So that's hard when you are a smart person and you want to do well and you are in a classroom where that is a constant demand that you read text that is not accessible to you. Okay, next slide. So this is our next exercise, and this is a dictation exercise. So if you are right-handed, you need to hold your writing instrument with your left hand. But if you are left-handed, please hold it with your right hand. Okay, and I am going to dictate some sentences and you need to write what I say. So number 1, James went to the store for milk. James went to the store for milk. Number 2, Imani studied for her science test. Imani studied for her science test. And number 3, Juan asked, "Where is my pencil?" Juan asked, "Where is my pencil?" So does anyone have anything to share about how that felt to have to write that with their non-dominant hand?
Yeah, I would love to share. While trying to write, I found that, as you were reading, and going on to the next item, I was rushing to follow along. And that really put into perspective, I think, something that perhaps I didn't think about too much maybe when I'm doing like writing exercises or spelling exercises with some students, of that feeling of like being rushed or anxiety that they're feeling of, oh, I need to catch up. I'm barely done with the sentence, but they're going on to the next one. So that was frustrating.
Yeah, yes, for sure. You can feel the anxiety, right? I think that it's important so writing is a really complex task. And so for someone with dyslexia, there's so many things that might kind of make it difficult. You have to hold in your memory the words that you want to write. You have to, every word it's not automatic. So you have to think about how that word is spelled. You might even have to think about the sounds in the words. You have difficulty breaking the word apart to identify the sounds. You might even have difficulty recalling how to shape the letter. It's an extremely complex task, and that's important to understand with dyslexia. I think for my son, who's 16 now, writing is by far the most difficult thing. And so people are really lucky to have accommodations now, like voice to text technology. Okay, so next slide. What do you do if your child has reading difficulties? So the first thing, have a conversation with your child's teacher. Ask about the reading skills screeners or assessments that are used as part of regular instruction and how your child did overall and on individual subtests. So as many of you may be aware, starting in the fall, all schools across California are required to screen students for reading difficulties, including risk of dyslexia in K2. The purpose of the screener is to identify children who are struggling. It is not to identify kids as having dyslexia. So I'm sure there will be a lot of questions about that. So if the screener indicates that your child did not pass the screener, it is an opportunity for you to talk to the teacher and to think about what went wrong and and maybe do some more testing or some more observation of where your child is. But we're really excited about that screener because it will provide an evidence-based measure to look at screening. And so there will be more to come on that. Okay, so also ask about multi-tiered systems of support in the school. So that is the system that the state of California recognizes as important for identifying kids who are struggling and providing them early support. Not all schools have those systems in place, but you should learn and find out what opportunities there are for your child to get extra support at school. Ask about the Tier 1 curriculum being used. So Tier 1 refers to the general education curriculum that is in the general ed classroom to teach kids to read. Many districts across the state of California have done a big shift in recent years from what is commonly referred to as balanced literacy or Lucy Calkins to like a science of reading or a phonics-based approach. This is a major change, and it's certainly not everywhere. There are still schools that are using balanced literacy. Balanced literacy is not effective for kids with dyslexia. It received a lot of media attention over the last 5 years, but basically it encourages children to guess, to use picture cues, context clues, and it does not emphasize explicit teaching of word reading. So it's important that the instruction be explicit and systematic and direct. And then also you should ask your teacher, if your child is receiving any additional help and what that looks like. And are they making progress? So it's important to know how the school is following the child's progress. There should be some what's called progress monitoring practices in place. Okay, next slide.
Hey, Megan, just a quick
Yeah.
question. Who will be administering the test? Will it be the classroom teacher?
I don't believe that it is named in the law, but I'm going to look that up for you. So, yeah. So if there is no MTSS, if your child is not making progress with the intervention, it might be time for more testing by the school for special education eligibility. And so there are steps that need to be taken to ensure that your child has access to this testing. So you need to write a letter to the principal requesting the school assess your child for special ed eligibility. And it's important that you deliver the letter via mail with delivery confirmation or email, just so you have it so that it's dated, because the school has 15 calendar days to respond to you in writing. And your letter should include specific concerns about your child and the difficulties they're having. And some examples might be how long they take to do homework, any data from report cards or state testing and so forth. And Megan, I'm not reading the chat, so if you want to interrupt with any questions that are timely, feel free. We don't have to hold them all to the end. You don't need to. So what do you do if your child has reading difficulties? So you will receive what's called a prior written notice from the school, either denying or agreeing to the assessment request. So the previous slide mentioned that you can request an assessment, and then if it's granted, then you will get this prior written notice that denies or accepts. And then once that is sent, the district has 60 calendar days to do so, and within this time frame, an initial IEP meeting to discuss the assessment results must also be scheduled. Okay. Let's see. So this goes on details about the IEP meeting. And what that looks like, that's the IEP means individualized education plan. And so a student who is found to be eligible for special education will receive an IEP. And the IEP it's a legal document that calls out the goals or it calls out the areas of weakness or the eligibility that the child has met. So students with dyslexia often are most commonly identified as having a specific learning disability. It's still not, I wouldn't say common that districts are using the word dyslexia in their IEP documents. But if it's an SLD under reading, I mean, I recommend you treat it like dyslexia. As we talked about before, kids with dyslexia need high quality reading instruction, high quality structured literacy. They might need it with more intensity and for longer duration, but it's essentially the same instruction that most other children who are struggling to read will need with the foundations of reading. Okay. So the IEP meeting can really be a kind of a daunting experience, and we always recommend, bring a friend, bring an advocate. bring someone you trust, ask for the meeting to be recorded ahead of time. These are all helpful things. Our support groups that meet monthly, we spend a lot of time coaching people for their IEP meetings and reviewing the goals and letting them know that they're not alone, because it can really feel isolating to be a parent of a child with an IEP. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is an important point. Once the assessment results have been discussed and questions have been answered, you will learn if your child qualifies for services, which I kind of talked about. If you don't agree with the determination, you can request what is called an independent education evaluation at the school's expense. So what this is you can do more thorough testing by an outside provider, paid for by the school district, and you will receive a more thorough evaluation. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so what is the latest with universal screening and literacy policy in California? So DDCA has been involved in policy and legislation for a while now. Let me see, I'm going to look at my notes because I have dates on here. Okay, so in 2017, the dyslexia guidelines were passed. Then in 2021, SB 488, which resulted in new standards for teacher credentialing programs. And this was a big deal because we know that the solution for struggling readers is teachers trained in evidence-based practices. And so this law changed the requirements for teachers in teacher preparation programs across California, that they now are required to teach about evidence-based practices, structured literacy, and dyslexia. Then in 2023, after it felt like many years and several bills, we finally passed universal screening law. And as I mentioned, this requires that all students are screened for risk of reading difficulties, including dyslexia in K2. Parents may opt out. There are special provisions for kids who are learning English, English learners, because we know that when students are learning English, it does make identifying the reading difficulties an extra layer of attention is needed to distinguish whether it is a language that they're just learning English or if there is a reading problem that needs to be addressed. And so that was in 2023, that was the universal screening, and it's starting in the fall. Also importantly, with universal screening, the law requires that parents are given the opportunity to opt out, so notified ahead of time, and then following the screening, parents must be notified with the results, and the district must provide, must name how the plan to address the students' challenges if they are behind. So, and then the final thing on this slide, the upcoming legislation. So AB 1454 is currently in the works, and sorry. And we have big news today in that part of that bill isn't going to be incorporated in the Governor's Budget Act. So more to come on that, but that bill addresses professional development for teachers who are currently in classrooms working, as well as it updates the state curriculum list for language arts.
And then we do have another question here in the chat, which is, how do I find an advocate to help me get support for my child?
Okay, so we have some resources that might be able to help you. So what is that? I don't know if that person wants to share what community they live in. Well, okay, so we have support groups. We also have some very active Facebook groups where people ask that question all the time. If you are in San Francisco, we have some resources here, such as support for families. CASE is another place where you can get names of advocates. But we find in our community, it's really like a people who've been through it are really happy to help others. So it's, you know, I think a good idea to ask other people you know who've experienced this. But we don't have like a list of advocates that we share, because we find that it's changing all the time too. So
Thank you.
So this slide is some details about the dyslexia guidelines, which are just guidelines, but they were really critical in bringing that word dyslexia into schools, which was, it was kind of like a forbidden word, which was kind of bizarre. Still is strange to me, but okay, next slide. Okay, and this is 488, which I talked about, which changed the teacher preparation programs. So that's key. And then screening, which I also talked about. And then here we are currently, as I mentioned, in implementation for universal screening. So right now, school districts must select the screener that they're going to be using next fall. So and on our website, we have all this information, but there was an expert panel that approved screeners, so they need to select one or more screeners from that list, and then the screening will begin in the fall. And then this is the bill that I mentioned that we are involved. We were a co-sponsor of a previous bill, but that changed, and now AB 1454 is a compromise bill, and it is related to professional development for teachers who are currently working in schools, because they're not going to benefit from the changes to the teacher preparation programs. And then also, as I mentioned, the curriculum updates to the state adopted list. And I have some resources to share with you. These are all QR codes that go to some resources on our website. And then if you would, I don't know if you've already done this, May, but I had some links that I shared with you. If you could add those to the chat, if a link might be easier for you. The links go to our website, and on our website, you please sign up for our email updates, because we like to keep everyone informed about legislation, and we keep a regular blog where we share news. So that's our website, and there's some good resources here. The DDCA You Asked library there's a lot of like technical questions about special education and so forth, and those are some helpful answers there. So next slide. Okay, and then we are active on social media. Those are all of our social media handles. Please get involved there. And so we have our DDCA page where we post news and important articles, but then we also have a private group that people are really generous in sharing suggestions and helping one another out, and sharing resources. So that's an active group, and I encourage you to join that one. And I am happy to answer any questions.
If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to pop them in the chat or unmute as well and just ask them. I see there are some questions in the chat. Let's see. Okay. Someone asked, can you say more about what skills are assessed in the universal screener, such as nonsense words, words correct per minute?
I can share a resource that can be mailed out, because I don't want to get those details wrong, but it definitely the screeners so there was an expert panel named, and the folks who were on that panel, there were some educators, but also nationally known experts on screening. And so they identified the screeners that had a strong evidence base, but also meet the criteria that's selected in the law. So you're right, there is, I feel like because it's different by each grade level, because as natural development works. So I don't want to name them incorrectly, but we will certainly make sure that those answers are in the resources that are shared.
Great. Another question is, with dyslexia being able to be identified in preschoolers, can we train our preschool teachers to be able to administer the screening so we can get the children intervention sooner?
So I think first of all, so we can identify children who may be at risk of dyslexia, but I wouldn't go as far as we need to diagnose children in preschool. I think all knowledge for teachers, whether preschool or elementary school or high school, is valuable, and especially preschool where language is such an important focus. I think that all preschool teachers they need to know about phonological awareness and how important it is to work with students on developing their language. So I think it really would be beneficial for teachers to understand and know about dyslexia, and it would inform their teaching practices. I think it would be beneficial to, I don't recall exactly what the question was, but it's valuable for sure, but we currently don't have any policy in place to screen in preschool.
Great. Does the person who asked that question have any follow-up questions before I move on to the next one?
Oh, I was the one with this question. So I run Spanish or preschools, and we've implemented like 7 years ago a speech and language pathologist doing a screener so that we can help identify, because the teachers were realizing there was kids at risk, but to really get through to the parents, we needed that SLP support. And so I'm just wondering if we can take this one step further, and if we're able to administer those screeners ourselves to learn how to do that, or do we have to bring in an outside resource to do it?
Okay, that's a great question. So the screeners that have been identified for the state are grade specific, so they wouldn't be applicable to preschool. However, I believe that there are some validated tools for preschool. I think Nadine Gabb is working on something, but I will pull up some articles to add to be shared following this. So yeah, Nadine Gabb with Early Bird, I think, was working on something for preschool.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Really excited for all the resources that will be shared. Another question is, if I have a student with dyslexia in my class, what should I be cautious about, and how should I approach supporting them effectively?
Great question. Well, I think everyone with dyslexia would agree, don't call on this person to read aloud without checking in with them. So, everyone's different, but I hear over and over again the trauma that is experienced when kids who struggle with reading are called on and must read in front of their peers. It can really be, anxiety inducing and traumatizing. I think understanding the IEP, if there is an IEP, and how you can support a child. Everyone is different. Yeah, there's so many accommodations too. So like, I know that audiobooks can be really valuable, especially for older students who they should be receiving that instruction so they can close the gap and can become skilled readers. But at the same time, the reading load might just not simply be accessible to them. And so they can engage in ear reading, which is using audiobooks to compensate, because if they can't keep up with that reading individually with their eyes, eye reading.
Yeah, it's great to hear that, there's a lot of different, with technologies, there's going to be a lot of different other resources that make these more accessible. Another question is, we have a lot of really great questions, so I'm glad that we have still some time to answer them. If my kid is screened for dyslexia and does not have dyslexia, but still struggles to read, what should I do? Should I go through the IEP process?
So I think that depends on the situation. I think that a lot of people, when they see signs, they automatically want to, get that special ed eligibility. But I think it's more important that you find, if you can get your child, don't delay in getting your child the supports they need. So whether that is working with the teacher to see, is my child getting intervention at school? What does it look like? How regular is it? Is my child, or finding quality tutors, that can be really important. I think that getting that help is the first thing, and then following up with the school district and requesting an evaluation.
Great. Okay. Can you address if there are efforts at the state level to address the challenges facing older or secondary students who have never learned how to read?
So we know that this is really an ongoing challenge and really frustrating, and it's not acceptable. I think in California, we're kind of behind the national curve in our policy. So at this time, we've been focusing on elementary, but I think that hopefully in the future, we will be able to shift our focus on the middle and high school students, because they need that support.
And I have a follow-up question with that. I'm just wondering, what do you envision that support could look like? Is it like perhaps having secondary teachers be also trained in teaching how to read? I know that now a lot of secondary teachers are they're subject teachers, they learn to teach your subject, but is that something along the lines of what you can envision?
I mean, as we know, like a trained teacher is the solution, right? I mean, I don't even think the language arts teachers in high school, they don't know how to teach reading. So, it's critical that I wouldn't recommend that all teachers in high school, have to have this training, but I think it's critical that all high schools and middle schools are equipped with specialized teachers with the specialized training.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. Do you happen to know if a student who is being assessed for an IEP using the CTOPP should be assessed in all subtests or just some subtests?
I don't know, but I do know that the CTOP is an important assessment of phonological processing. And I know the rapid naming is a really important piece. So I don't recall all of the subtests in that test, but I know that they are important. So I don't have the details to answer that.
Okay, we have one more question so far. Can you explain a bit about how your support groups are started and what determines their effectiveness and participation?
Okay, sorry, I was interrupted. But did you say that the question was, how do you start a support group, or what?
Can you explain a bit about how your support groups are started and what determines their effectiveness and participation?
Okay, so people reach out to us all the time. So we've just over time developed support groups in various parts of the state, and they are led by volunteers. It's really because it's a volunteer-based thing. I wouldn't say that there's a huge amount of oversight. It's people helping each other out. Most of them are on Zoom now, and so some of the groups do offer speakers and events, and because it's on Zoom, we can share those with other groups.
Awesome. Does anyone else have a question for Megan while she's here? You can feel free to unmute yourselves and ask it. Otherwise, I'm going to share one final screen. Well, thank you to everyone who took the time to come to this event tonight, and especially to Megan for coming to our community and talking to us a little bit about dyslexia and helping us understand what signs to look out for, and especially sharing what kind of what are the next steps for parents and educators who may not have that information already. So if you would like to see more of events like these, you can follow us on social media, where we will be hopefully hosting more speaker series events. If you have a student that you feel is struggling in reading, you can contact us as well. LearnUp Centers is a nonprofit literacy clinic based in San Francisco, but we serve students all over the nation. And yeah, please keep in contact. We'll be sharing about more about our events on our social media and to our newsletter. And this meeting is being recorded, so a recording will be available to everyone. And I will also be sharing the PowerPoint presentation, also all of the resources that Megan mentioned as well. So yeah, thank you to everyone for joining, and I hope you have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.